Welcome everybody to this 49th edition of the Madaxeman podcast. This week we've got the regular crew talking about their week in painting and also their week in sneaking deliveries in through the mailbox and past the security guards in their houses. And in a new departure we also do, I wouldn't say a deep dive, more a sort of splash around in the shallow end, looking at the Late Imperial Roman army, discussing a bit of the history, a bit of the shield pattern stuff, and also cantering through what figures you can choose if you're putting that army together. We have Andy's quiz, and we also have the results from our first ever giveaway from episode 48. And also, don't forget, watch out for the love eggs.
This means war. This means war.
Right, well, this is number 49. That's 7 more than the answer to life, the universe, and everything, I guess, which shows how long we've been doing this podcast. And here we are after a vaguely brief hiatus. But by delaying it, we've managed to get into full, proper UK, well, not UK, England-wide lockdown. I think there's a shorter lockdown in Wales, and there's a different lockdown in Scotland, and then something else going on in Northern Ireland that's pretty similar but just got a different name. So we're all kind of locked in, really. That's the long and the short of it, which gives us a great opportunity to get ourselves together back on a normal Monday night recording session in lieu of Central London Wargames Club actually being open. And
Adam could nip out tomorrow or Wednesday to play a game.
It's true, actually. Yeah, Adam, you can sneak in. You've got a couple more days down on the south coast, but the rest of us are all effectively shuttered as much as we can already, as our category 2 goes up to category 4 on our 3-point scale of previous lockdowns. And in this one, we discussed last time we were out attempting to do something a little bit different. We can't do 50 the same, and trying to have a bit of a focus on one particular army, which will be the late Romans in Art de la Guerre. I think it's one that we covered in a list section about a dozen or so, or half a dozen or so podcasts back, but we wanted to try and do something different and have a bit more of a chat about the actual army, the figures, how it gets put together, what really happens. So we'll see how that goes, see if we actually know anything whatsoever at all about wargaming. But before we do that, we've got the full set of 7 back as usual. We can see people, I think Simon, Dave and Adam and Andy are all literally painting as we speak. Which is not a bad turnout. That's 4 out of the 7, and I think everybody is literally drinking as we speak. Anybody raise a glass? Here we go. Oh yeah, that's a much fuller set, really. That's all 7 definitely. I did get my lockdown was announced, and I think within a couple of hours I had an email from my account with Majestic Wine Warehouse saying we are staying open as an essential business, which certainly cheered me up and got me through it. But without further ado, let's start going round the houses and have a talk about what's been painted in the last week. So if I start with Tamsin and your fantastic Judge Dredd wallpaper that you have behind you, am I guessing is that a Judge Dredd thing, or was it infamy still over the last couple of weeks?
It was a mix. I said I'd started painting some Copperstone figures. I think I said I started painting some Copperstone.
Yeah, I think they'd arrived last time we were on, wasn't it? I think these were the...
No, I think last time I said I'd ordered some figures from Warlord Games, but they have arrived, but that's not these. So I painted up some Copperstone sort of near future military types. Use as a second city defence force for Judge Dredd.
How can you tell which are the Trumps and which are the Bidens?
Yeah, I'm not sure America's quite got to that stage yet. But yeah. So these aren't specific Judge Dredd type figures.
No, these are old ones from Copperstone miniatures. I wanted a sort of different looking city death, and
yeah, no, they're really good sci-fi.
Yeah, and given sort of more military theme, they look a bit more like mercs from Commando or Predator. So they're obviously from the Arnie Schwarzenegger block.
Right. Is that what it's known as, the Arnie Schwarzenegger film range or something like that?
No, it's just near future, so I had fun painting.
Future badasses and stuff like that. It looks like you've got some really good...
painting those up and...
Yeah, no, they've got really kind of ripped... They look like they've got really ripped arms and stuff like that. How did you do... What was your layering? Because I always try and do that kind of layering on the arms every now and then to give that sort of,
Right, and normally
find the muscles.
right.
But it always looks a mess when I end up doing it.
So for flesh, for Caucasian flesh, I tend to do something like start off with saddle brown, then a mix of saddle brown and red beige. I'm talking Vallejo colours here. Then I do flesh wash, and then I layer up with sort of red beige, adding in a bit of a lighter colour, either a sort of light flesh or one of the skin tones.
Do you blend them in, or is it just sort of layering and sort of pseudo dry brushing? Because
it's layering. I don't do dry brushing on flesh normally.
Right, but are you layering them kind of wet, or is it?
It's wet layering. So each layer is dry before I apply the next. So
okay, right,
smaller area each time, just build up. So it's about 4 or 5 layers after the wash. About 4 or 5 layers.
That might be where I go wrong then, because I always try and think, can I do this in about 2? And then it just doesn't really work properly.
Yeah, on the 28, you need to take your time to get it looking smooth.
Yeah, they look grand.
So some of the females, the Caucasian females in there, rather than using red beige, I start off with, I think it's rose brown, which gives a slightly pinker look.
Is that the name of one of the characters?
Rose Brown. It's one of the people in 2018. And then there's some more of your stencils and graphics and things on the walls as well there.
Well, those were all
done a while ago,
which were painted and shown here before. So yeah, and besides that, I've got the leader figures for Infamy primed, and I've started painting the mounted figures, mounted leaders. I've got the horses done and made a little bit of a start on the riders. Yeah, but I'm taking it slow and easy at the moment.
No, that's good. Okay, that's fantastic. No, that looks really, really gritty and urban. They'll fit in very well when you move up north, I imagine. That's the way it'll work. Okay, so Peter, what about you? What's been your last couple of weeks? I'm just trying to remember. Did you buy some Brunswickers? Were you one of the internet Brunswicker people, or did you go for another country? Were they even countries then?
No, I've got I've got several that are coming along. I was thinking of getting some Brunswick. I've got Bavarians on the way, some AB Bavarians. I've got some from Andy that I've just undercoated, but I'm still waiting for my order to come in of some of the Bavarians. Meanwhile, I've just been going through a backlog of stuff trying to get stuff cleaned up and then undercoated, where each time I go to do undercoating, it's then starts raining. So it's been fits and starts. So I normally just spray it all outside. So finding a spot where it's not going to get spotty.
It's actually been a kind of self-discipline thing about trying to actually do this with, do the undercoat on a whole lot of figures first then.
Yeah, it's just sort of cleaning up and prepping, because with the nights drawing in and everything else and being on lockdown, I just want to get the whole sort of production line ready, because I like to, if I'm doing a unit, I like to do it as a batch, because I always forget what colours I'm using and everything else. I know some people are much more disciplined and much more set out in and some people have even got notes from when they were a teenager, haven't they, Dave? About shield designs and things. I'm barely lucky if I remember which Vario paint I was using last week. So I like to do them en masse as a group, especially sort of like the regiment type looking ones, because one, it's a lot easier for me to paint, and two, I find it looks a little bit better on the tabletop.
Okay, so how many undercoated figures do you think you've got then, or managed to get through this week?
3 figures.
3. Oh, right. Okay. That's a bit of a waste of this. Oh, 3 figures. Oh, right. Okay. You're. What does that mean? That there's someone listening in on you that you don't want to admit how much you bought?
I don't. Yeah, I
would never say that
at all.
No, you wouldn't want to admit that at all either.
No, okay. It's just I daren't admit it to myself, because then I know I've got to paint the damn stuff. No, it's just getting it ready. I mean, the ones I've got to plow through literally plough horses, is the cavalry, because it's just I like to make the horses look a bit more lifelike, and you can't just do them all regimental colours and everything else. You've got to actually put a bit more into them. But I'm aiming now, having spoken to a few people in this group and done a bit of research, to have sort of some of the allied contingents that a lot of the Napoleonic armies rock up with. So Bavarians with the French and Austrians, some Brunswickers as well. They turned up in a couple of different things. So been happily surprising myself with a couple of things on that, just to add up. And then, looking at a couple of other lists for next year when the next version of the ADLG book comes through.
Okay, so it's just a whole set of undercoated figures of all sorts of different periods. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I suppose the risk is if you do that, you end up chipping little bits off the undercoat, or.
No, I've basically got a couple of boxes where I've just lined them with foam. So It's almost like my mini production line. So they go there, okay. They're off ready, because I've just had plenty of experience of like doing a project, then stuff goes crazy with work or family and everything else, having to store it away. So I've just got it there ready to go. This box, so I've got one box with like Persians in, one box with Napoleonics in, and it's just there to pull out when I'm ready to tackle that unit. I can just go at it and have fun.
Okay, all right. Well, that's it's good self-discipline there to get that all done. And I think you mentioned Dave going back to Dave's childhood and some sort of, I guess written on parchment sort of notes from his early painting experiences. What was it? Was it papyrus, Dave, or was it actual Chinese made paper?
It's the Notitia Dignatum from.
Well, you actually wrote that, did you? Was it you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Certainly that was the original one.
No, we'll talk about late Romans later on, but it was actually my original copy from the 70s of Phil Barker's Armies and Enemies of Imperial Rome, where I find it daft to cross-reference the shield pattern with the actual description of which unit was which.
Oh, that was a classic, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
I copied the page of the shield patterns, cut them out and glued them in the book next to the description so I could tell which were which.
That is old school.
At least 40 plus years ago. So.
Wow, yeah. When you were less geeky than you are now, possibly.
Well, that's kind of how I got into UCL to study ancient history, I think.
Thanks to Phil Barker. But what have you been painting though this week? Sorry, I'm just opening another bit here. Early doors.
All the light infantry and the bowmen for the Franks are done and dusted.
So is that all of the three Frankish armies then, or just?
And I've still got 3 bags of 24 each of Frankish heavy foot still left to do.
That's another 9 or 10 bases, definitely. You'll definitely get 10 bases out of that.
But I've got bored of doing that stuff, so I'm actually doing some French line infantry limbers.
Okay. Are there line infantry limbers different to the other types of limbers, or are they just limbers?
Line artillery limbers.
French line artillery limbers. So I've simply been painting them, getting them prepared.
What's the difference, dare I ask?
They're line artillery and not horse artillery. And they wear more infantry sort of uniforms, but in a grey, apparently. I discovered.
Ooh. So actually, there is a different colour then. They do.
We talk about the artillery train. They wore kind of light blue, I thought, with black shakos, but maybe that was wrong.
I thought the French, you just sprayed them all blue.
That is blue-grey. It's a blue-grey uniform. So I'm actually sitting here painting those.
Yeah, but this is the artillery train. They're not like real soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you need a couple of limbers at least. And I've repainted what was Foggen skirmishers. So Tyralias, Voltigeurs, and I've rebased them onto 40mm by 15, so I can use them for skirmish.
Skirmish stands, yeah.
And also for squares. And I found some other French. I've got about 12, 16 French line, which I can base on 40 by 15, so I can turn them into squares as necessary. but my other purchase, my new purchase has arrived, which is my Württemberg division, which is not as huge as it sounds like. But one sort of, I don't know, battalion regiment of Württemberg light infantry, who, quite frankly, I wouldn't be able to tell much difference between them and a French light infantryman.
Right.
Have they got shackles, or have they got sort of like rapid helm type hats?
Well, they've got shakos on with. I mean,
Right, shackles.
they haven't got a plume.
No.
They've got. I suppose they have got a vaguely different.
Are you going to be sort of like writing on the basis of these, so you can actually tell who's who in a year's time?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I've got 12 of the light infantry marching, and the same again. So they can split.
Or have you got another book, Dave, with sort of like the Württemberg division and then a picture of them by the side of it?
Well, this has been. I know absolutely FA about Württemberg in the Napoleon Wars, so I've had to be doing some research. So I've actually been going online, and I bought flags for them from somebody called not War Flags, somebody else, Maverick Flags.
Yeah, their stuff's very nice.
Yeah, I bought them for my French line infantry. I bought the material one, which I didn't quite. So I've gone for the one which is
the cloth ones. Yeah, they're nice.
This time I've gone for the paper ones. But the Württemberg, basically, there's only like 4 units of line infantry in their entire army, so you just buy each one, and they're pink, yellow, green, or something like that, depending on, So that's going to be fun. That's going to be my winter. Yeah, that's
project. Colourful Napoleonics. That's going to be your next couple of months.
Actually sitting here sharpening the bayonets
when the lockdown extends. Okay.
This means war.
Andy, what about you? What have you done over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I've more or less finished the feudal English, kerns, cavalry, spearmen, a whole lot, and then I've also rebased some of the old metal ones which I bought from Clive, and so they're practically finished now. So I'm now moving on to trying to finish sort of bits of 15mm stuff I've got floating around. Like I'm undercoating some camels at the moment, which will be for the Seleucids, and if I ever decide to go for the Persians, they'll be in that army as well.
All right, so just some odds, bits and pieces then.
Odds and sods. And I did think, oh, hang on, what am I going to paint? I'm going to run out of things. Then I suddenly remembered that I've got a load of World War II miniature aeroplanes to paint, and I've got the Italian fleet in 1/3000 scale to paint. And I've got the basic set.
Is that before or after it was scuttled? Because one could be easier than the other, couldn't it?
Yeah, but you can't really put them on the table if they've been deemed to be scuttled by then. So it makes them.
It depends. Scenario-based games are all the rage, really, aren't they? It could be. That could be the answer.
Yeah, to take them out at Taranto.
Yeah, there was a war games group. I don't know who they were. A few years ago at some shows, they had a demonstration game of Taranto that you could take part in, and the idea was to fly a fairy swordfish and try and sink an Italian battleship. And I've actually, one of my long-term ambitions is to do a campaign based on Malta convoys, where Operation Pedestal was the big one that went through in 1942, where you had the British fleet to force the convoy through because Malta was about to starve, and there was a possibility the Italian fleet could have come out and challenged it, and so that would be and I've got a set of war game rules from, I can't remember who they are now, but it's got a sort of mini campaign module for that, so I thought that might be something to try sometime.
Okay, well, would that be using those what is it, Cruel Seas fleets at all, or is it just bigger scale stuff than that?
No, it's much smaller than that. It's the because Cruel Seas is just like motor torpedo boats and stuff. I've got the basic kit for that, but this would be battleships and cruisers in 1/3000 scale. So you'd be using a full-size table, but smaller ships.
Okay.
Physically smaller ships, but they represent bigger types of ship.
Super tiny stuff. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about you, Simon? Because I think Well, actually, just reminds me, whilst we're on it, I think on the last week or so, I got something through on Google. So this is going to be a supplementary question as well as what you've been painting. So one of the many places this podcast is syndicated is on Google Podcast Manager. So you can get this on Google, and that gives me some stats on what sort of search terms people are putting in when this podcast pops up. And clearly top one, 380 search terms for Madaxeman, or 381 impressions for Madaxeman, and this podcast comes up if you're searching for podcasts. A very poor second after that 381 was made to measure shutters in rugby. I'm not quite sure why anybody would find this podcast interesting if they're looking for replacements for stormproof their windows. But if you're here, I'm sure we could recommend someone. And then number 4 was
rugby.
Yeah, possibly it might be the other type of rugby. But then number 4, with 13 people keying this in, which is probably a thing in its own right, but this podcast comes up on Google apparently if you key this in, was Vibrating Eggs Australia. So Simon, if you'd like to, as our resident expert, tell us both what you've been painting this last week or so, and also if you've got any insight into what, we've no idea, obviously. None of us have seen 50 Shades or been forced to watch it. So
I don't understand.
Vibrating Eggs Australia, how do they work from a wargaming point of view?
I don't understand.
Well, you've been in lockdown for 3 to 6 months. You're quite bored. There's not much else to do. I think
Is it a paint stirrer, maybe, or is it something like that? Or
it definitely stirs a few things. It helps reinvigorate blood flow and focuses your mind on things.
But not necessarily painting, possibly.
No, but Victoria, where I'm from or used to live, they just came out of a 113-day lockdown. So I think by the end of that, quite a few new creative ideas had come to mind.
Right. Okay. So it is lockdown related then, possibly. That might be the link. It's the kind of thing that you look for in lockdown, and you're looking for a lockdown podcast, and you're also searching for Vibrating Eggs Australia.
Yeah, it might be a question was they're talking about love eggs, Australian vibrating love eggs, and I was thinking, were they emu love eggs, chicken eggs, goanna, or other lizard eggs? Because the different sizes could really shake things around.
Imagine an ostrich one.
Sulphur crested cockatoos.
Yes.
We're talking Australian emus, not ostriches.
Emus.
What about platypus? Do they lay eggs? Is that no? They're marsupials still, are they? I can never remember.
Sulphies.
Do platypi lay eggs?
Platypus lay eggs. I think they do.
Of course they do. So there's no manufacturer we know who makes small scale platypi or platypi eggs. Maybe that's something for some of these niche manufacturers.
I'd be amazed if Eureka don't.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, they're the experts for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
he does have a range of kangaroos with battle armor and weapons. So,
right, and I guess one of those weapons could be a vibrating love egg hand grenade, possibly. Actually, it probably goes back to those gnomes that I picked up as well, doesn't it? But all right, so look, we can actually, that is a very legitimate. There's a legitimate link. Then we've made a wargaming link and we've made a lockdown link, so possibly it does fit. But more pragmatically, what have you been painting in the last couple of weeks?
Haven't painted too much brand new. I've got a bunch of stuff on the work table, but what I did manage to complete was the ADLG Fantasy Dwarf Army. So,
they were nearly done last time, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've now got, you only need 20 or so bases for an army, so I've got 35 based up so far.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What you need is 10 of Dave's bases of Gothic foot to go with it as kind of giants or something.
Yeah, because big hairy people with swords is always quite good. But they've come out quite nice, and as most war gamers do, you're sort of rummaging through the box and you find random 25mm warlord Renaissance generals. So I found another general that I hadn't painted up. So I can't remember which one it is, but he's some English Civil War general with a big.
It looked a bit like King Charles.
Could be. So just another one pointing at someone saying, "Go that way." So
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I think Warlord have released a new set of 28mm.
Yeah, I had to stay away from
Use War Generals, wasn't it?
Yeah, I have to stay away from that website because it can get expensive.
They look really good.
Yeah.
It made me reading about the Bishop's War.
Mm.
Oh, okay. All right. We're not back to the love eggs thing, are we? With no.
No, I
No
found out
connection.
about a new
no
war,
bashing them.
Bishop's War.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Bishop bashing war. Fine.
Yeah.
We're all getting a bit too fat lardies there, aren't we? Really. It's all turning a little bit Top Gear. All right. So it's been a finishing off of dwarfs then. So that's all still getting smutty, isn't it? You've not been finishing off any dwarves this week. Right. So, Adam, what about you with your Boom Shakalaka t-shirt on there and painting, and still got your bandit mask on as well?
Oh yeah, no. So I just wear it until I go to bed. It's just so I don't forget it when I go out. I have been so pleased with the painting I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. First, I've finished off my Roman Cav, which was mainly basing, but I haven't managed to get them varnished yet for the last 10 days, mainly pitch spraying. But I started a batch of 12 Numidian Cav and 12 Slingers. And do you know, Tim, you were saying that you really dislike doing cavalry. So
yeah. Do the horses first. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on that. So I was doing the horses and the Numidians, and I've realised why I don't like doing horses. It's not that the horses are a pain. It's the horse and the saddle blanket and the straps and the reins and dangly bits hanging off the reins.
Yeah.
And when you're doing the horse, because of all the straps, you got to do, and it's just a pain. Whereas Numidian horses,
it's just a horse. Yeah.
it's like just wallop. So that was really.
The annoying bit for me when you're painting the horses is you think you're about done, then you just turn it the wrong way and you realise you missed a bit. And it's just the way you've been holding it. There's always that one bit where you miss.
I get that. But the other good thing, because where I'm doing the skirmishes, I can actually base them first. So they're two to a base, and it's like really easy, just like move them around. And because there's not loads of straps and other things going on, I can use the elephant brush to paint the horses.
Yeah.
And it's been really, really quick. And I've got 12 Slingers and 12 Numidians, and I'm just going to basically finish them this evening, apart from basic.
Yeah.
So, which for me is horrendously quick.
Are they those Victrix figures again? Still full set of those?
Yeah, I only needed 2 bases and Numidians, but I thought at some point I'll probably do some Carthaginians or something like that, so I'll get them all painted up.
Yeah.
And so that's how I've just got them bossed out really, really quickly. I've had a few games. I had a mini competition a week or two ago.
Yes, you did, didn't you? Yeah. How was that?
That was fun. It was just in fact, I couldn't get there for the first game, but it was a couple of games in a day. Turned up, played toy soldiers, talk nonsense, usual sort of stuff. That was quite good. And now I'm glad that I got.
Did you get some tea down you?
I got an awful lot of tea down me, but I was there for a good few hours, so I didn't have to didn't have to push it. So all in all, I've been having a successful couple of weeks hobby before we all get to
back into painting only. That's sort of part of the way the hobby works.
But, as a special tribute to the lockdown, I've given up on my usual beer for the day, and
you've got Corona. Okay,
you've
got to get some Corona down you because it's
you've got lime in the bottom top.
Right,
you got a lime stuffed in the top.
No, I haven't. Although this bottle is not particularly close to the camera. It is just a very big bottle.
Wow.
So that's a pint of Corona then. It's kind of
710 millilitres as opposed to the 650 or whatever. But so yes, life is good.
No, that's excellent.
Not being let out of the house.
Good, excellent. No, well, certainly for me, it's been more finishing off. I think I uploaded a load of pictures of those kit bashed Arabs, which look kind of good. I've been concentrating on starting to get to grips with some of the infantry, having finished off all the cavalry, and I've got a couple of bases of the Blackguard spearmen, which are using some of my favourite 28mm figures. Actually, I think I've done some of them before for a Saga army. in 28mm, but there's a range from North Star under one of their sub brands that do some really tough looking kind of fully cloth around the faces kind of spearmen, which kind of work out okay. That I've painted up as blackguard, and this is one of my final, never done before experiments with contrast paints. So there's a black Templar, which I'm sure my Arab spearmen will not want to know that they've been painted in black Templar, because that's a bit culturally inappropriate. But it's kind of a really dark, obviously it's really dark, sort of, it's a little bit greeny, but you know when you paint up black and you want to sort of dry brush it with a bit of blue or something, this kind of does that for itself, because it's a contrast paint. And whilst it's not quite black, I guess I'm really, really chuffed with it, because black is sometimes too black for genuine cloth, and whether anybody in the Middle Ages or ancient period or history would actually be able to dye black properly black cloth, you kind of don't think so. So this colour's come out really, really well. So I'm going to be taking some photos of those. The other good thing about
looking flat, because I know what you're saying about the black, because sometimes when you just have the plain black, it just looks.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a bit difficult getting the light doesn't really work on this.
Are those metals or plastic?
They're metals. They're one of the North Star. There's like 2 or 3 sub-brands.
Crusader or Artisan?
I think it's Crusader, but it
Crusader
might be Artisan.
A lot of the ancients, doesn't it?
Yeah, it might be Artisan. It's part of their Moorish range. But they're really nice, and they're actually quite big, bulky figures as well. So what I've found is my heavy infantry base, you can only actually fit 6 of the buggers on it, which makes it much more cost effective to make them into spearmen. But they do still fill the whole base. They come in packs of 4, so I've got 2 packs of 4, and then a couple of the gripping beast plastic ones to kind of fill out the back rank, and add to it and give them a little bit more variety, because the variety is just a smidge limited. And I've got a load of bowmen. I've done a couple of bases of bowmen as well, which are mostly these North Star figures as well, using some sort of blues and a set in red as well, with the different contrast paints on those. So
on the photograph on the what is up thing of the ones painted in black, is that's a contrast paint? Because it looked like you did a dry brush.
No, that's just the contrast paint on a white undercoat.
Like a greyish dry brush on top.
It does. It kind of naturally comes out like that. So that's the paint. It's really good, and I've just picked out some of the details in reds or blues, but really, really, really chuffed with them, and it just gives me a bit of a spur. Now I've done the 2 units of good quality spearmen, just to hurl myself at all the rest of them. And then I did also buy in some more kind of kit bashing experiments. So I got a pack of the it's not Victrix, the Persian archers from Wargames Atlantic, and I got what else did I get? I got a pack of the Perry new Afghans as well, which are kind of very comedy Arabic. They're kind of carry on film Arabic, with turbans and things like that. And then one more pack of just trying to think who the other ones were, as well as the Victrix ones. There's one more. I wonder who else it might have been. I think possibly it's the Wargames Atlantic. Actually, they also do a set of Afghans as well, and I've kind of kit bashed them together with the remaining spare Arab heads from all these different gripping beast things to make a very eclectic mix of what will be that Ghaznavid mixed infantry and archer formation, which I suddenly realized I could actually use some of the Persian Sparabara wicker shields, and as a front rank, they'll look sort of possibly okay-ish to make them particularly different to the rest of the generic Arab spearmen, with the Arab heads on them. So some of the heads are a bit different sizey. The Perry heads are quite big, and then some of the other bodies are it. The odd weird thing though with the Wargames Atlantic figures, they're really nice figures. They're Persian archers particularly, but their bows and their swords are so delicate. They might be proper scale for 28mm figures, but compared to the other ones, I ended up not using any of their arms, and certainly not any of their swords, because the sword was almost like a needle, and you're just thinking this is not going to survive wargaming usage. And it was kind of an odd one to think there's been so many plastic figures for so long, and this is kind of it's not the first ranges they've come out with, but to see these so fragile looking bows on people, when other ones have got, they do have a bit tree trunky, some of the gripping beast ones, but they're kind of odd. So hopefully, I think this week looks like it's going to clear up weather-wise towards the end of the week, but still be a bit nippy. So I might manage to get those ones undercoated, and then over the next month have a bit of a blitz on finishing off all of those infantry and get
saying about the swords. Do you know what that reminds me of?
Yeah, well,
Malifaux figures, which are completely and utterly beautiful, and they're fantastically made and fantastically cast.
Yeah.
The only thing they haven't done is manufactured them in a way that they're actually
usable,
toys in a game to play with.
Yeah,
because they're so good, but they're so delicate that it's sort of like, and you're looking at how to put two bits together, and it's like, how am I going to pin this 28mm stiletto heel to the ground? And it's like, sometimes it's really, really frustrating that they're obviously able to make fantastic figures, but they've given no thought to how those figures are going to be used.
But I think with
Adam,
Malifaux,
you usually do a lot of how am I going to stick on stiletto heels. Is that a regular occurrence for you?
back to the love eggs. Back to the love eggs, really.
Can I just check, love eggs, are they something you shove up your arse for pleasure?
Well, not personally speaking.
No, that's Games Workshop's. I paint figure holders for painting.
Yes, Games Workshop figure painting holders. Yes, yeah, that's another internet sensation of the last few weeks, isn't it? They do a single grip thing for painting, fastening figures on the top, and it's got clear other use potential for certain parts of the community, I believe. But so the internet tells me, allegedly. But I think with Malifaux, though, you are only picking up one figure at a time, and you're only touching them, 7 or 8 times during the game. Really, you're not moving them around a lot. Whereas with our sort of figures, they're multi-based, and you're picking up 1 or 2 of them to pick up a big block of figures on the base, and you're maybe moving them around a bit more. I don't know, but it was really striking compared to all of the other manufacturers in the way that they make spears, that this lot had just suddenly gone, sod it, we're doing them to scale, and it almost gives you a compatibility issue. But I guess with plastic figures, you can even just cut off the hand and use a different hand from a different set with a thicker bow or something like that, and still use the arms. So it's not tragic, but it was just really, really kind of striking. But but that's the Persians, and I think that's the roundup for the painting this week.
This means war.
Well, look, that was painting, and now we move on, of course, seamlessly, with no appreciable link whatsoever, to the glory of Rome, or possibly the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, or the middle of the end of the beginning, or something, depending on whether you're a fan of gibbons or other primates or whatever. But I think looking around the screen here, we've got some experts and some painters and wargamers around the mix as well. But I think possibly the best place to start is the man who notated his own notatum digitatum.
Yes.
We're not back to love eggs again with that one, are we? Notated his own notatum digitatum back in the mid 1940s or whenever it was. And Dave, so talk us through. This is a period in the Roman army. If I'm looking at the list, we're using the ADLG list because all of these Roman things are a little bit of a artificial construct, whether it's late or what brand it is. But this is really the period from ADLG terms 307 to 425 AD, which is sort of the tail end of Diocletian's accession and ending sort of towards the beginning of when it turned into the dominant army. Tail end of this is when the Western Empire sort of felt a bit, but the and the East sort of turned into Byzantines. Sorry?
Have you got Wikipedia up on the screen?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah. Look, this, I'm not. You can't imagine I actually know this crap. My God, I just know that they might have like red skirts. Really,
it sounded really impressive. It was good.
I can read all. It's great in Zoom because on a podcast, no one can see what you're looking at. So, but Dave,
Tim, what was the Roman equivalent of chicken marengo? Did they tell you?
I think that's later on in the episode. But Dave, talk us through this kind of period of the, what were the big battles? What were the big enemies? What was happening with the empire? What was happening with the army?
So we're in the late Imperial Roman, before the fall of the Roman Empire. We're I think we begin with Constantine. He's born in York. And travels back and creates a dynasty in Rome. But we're talking about a period at we're talking at the end of a lot of civil wars, where Diocletian, Constantine, and the Romans are splitting their empire into two halves and then into quarters. So you have a senior emperor and a sub-emperor and then two other ones. They all have their own field armies. They still end up having quite a few civil wars.
So was the split to those smaller divisions because it became too big to manage and it was an administrative thing, or was it actually princedoms and fiefdoms setting up as different power bases? And what drove it? Was it top down, bottom up?
Well,
none of them could command enough of an army to overcome the others totally. So it's just stalemate.
What it's basically done is a policy decision of one man couldn't cover the whole empire, and if the emperor was busy here, the other end of the empire either got overrun or upset that it was being ignored. So it was a policy decision of it's just too much for one emperor.
It's kind of the beginning of the empire being split into Eastern and Western for administration purposes. Also for the purpose that you've got distinctly different opponents. The Western part of the empire is fighting the Goths at this point, whereas the Eastern part of the empire is fighting the Parthians and then the Sassanids. So you've got two distinctly different armies appearing. Plus, as I say, you've got a lot of civil wars. You've got Constantine, civil war comes to power. Milvian Bridge, where I've been to in Rome. I've got photos of that. That's a good spot in Rome if anybody goes there. We like that. You've got Julian trying to take on the Persians and going all the way into central Persia before getting caught a cropper. And you've got the beginning of the Christian period as well.
So is this the classic era of the Romans going into the desert against the Parthians and then the Persians and all those sorts of battles, or is it a bit? Am I getting the Parthians confused? Because there's I thought the earlier ones were.
Crassus has died and all that sort of nonsense.
The Parthians was about 300 years before that. I think they'd been kind of overtaken by the Sassanids by then.
Okay.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. It is that sort of period. I mean, you come to that sort of 2nd century, 3rd century crisis in the Roman Empire. And now they're sort of recovered and they're doing quite well in actual fact. But no, it's there's a lot of warfare going on. It's the period when the Roman Empire stopped expanding, but it's trying to measure itself. It's also changed its identity quite a lot. The army is no longer the army of the legionaries fighting in the classical square-shielded, without getting specific about different Roman armies. The Loricus Segmenta is the classic Roman army that everybody knows with the little plates sewn on.
That's the one from
which was
from the Carry On
probably
film,
less
isn't it?
prevalent than most people imagine.
Yeah.
For Hamata, the chainmail was probably much more common.
So chainmail's their main form. They've, as we've all been discussing earlier a lot, they've changed their shields. Their shields have become much more gradually from the 3rd century onwards to this point. Their shields have become much more oval, And I think that's because they form a kind of shield wall to protect themselves from arrows. It actually gets referred to as phalanxes, because a lot of their opponents, particularly in the East, are now like horse archers. So they've been fighting the Alans quite a bit, that sort of thing. And they fight
early stages of the Hunnic Confederation.
Well, this runs up to the Huns and Attila as well. So, I mean, it's a period in wargaming terms. I think a lot of ancient wargamers begin their armies with a late Roman army. It's one that every wargamer's got, every ancient wargamer's got as a late Roman army. And also because we've got a lot of evidence, as you said earlier, and we've got the thing called the Notitia Dignitatum, which is like a list of, well, allegedly a list of Roman shields. So it's been found in medieval books from the 14th century, and it's supposed to be covered copies and copies and copies down through history of actual original Roman shields from this period, which tell you where those units came from. So you've got, for example, you've got a yellow shield with red lines across it, which is supposed to be a British infantry unit of the Roman army. So the other thing that's interesting to say is that a lot of the Roman army at this period are now barbarians who are being brought into the Roman army, trained as Roman soldiers. So they've got a lot of, you've got units which are Gothic, which are Goths. So that on their shields in the Notitia Dignatum, you've got like a stake with a head on top, which is always good fun to paint. And there's also some very, very good transfers for doing this army.
Okay, so is that that move towards this Gothic barbarian thing? Is that moving away? Is that what undermines the army? Because the empire still sounds like it's not shrinking, but it's still attempting to do some kind of outreach into the hinterlands, or were all the battles they fought defensive to kind of maintain the empire they had?
I think it's still going strong. It's got a field army, which is significant. It's still got an infantry corps, but it is becoming a lot more cavalry based to counter its enemies. Its enemies are now, it's moved on from a period where the Sarmatians were its enemies. You've got Vegetius's book on the war against the Alans, where he despised how to fight the Alans, who were heavy cavalry and horse archers. So they've gradually become more Gothic in there, if that's a strange word to say. So they've got a lot more heavy cavalry in their army now. Did
they start using more artillery and things, or tricky things as well?
That's a good one. I mean, what's it called? Gladiators.
Well, it's certainly a switch from the pilum more towards spear.
Yes, they've got a sort of spear, it's still a throwing spear, but it's more of it's something which can be used against cavalry as well. Okay. And their swords have got longer. They've moved from the gladius to the spatha, the spatha is a heavy cavalry sword. So it's longer and it's more, it's more a slashing weapon than a stabbing weapon. Yeah. So
it's kind of reach out and touch me from. But is this being driven different? Because the empire's split into 2 and then 4. So is there a different evolution of military tech in the 2 sides of it, or is there a sense of commonality across the empire at this stage?
To use apologies, that's a very good question, Tim.
Right. Okay.
No. What I would say is that I think in the West they've still got heavy infantry based formations to fight Gothic heavy infantry. In the East, they've adopted much more cavalry to fight the enemy. They're adapting to their enemies in a lot of ways. They've got more light horse of their own. What were, the Moorish cavalry have become part of the unit. So the units are named Illyricani, where they're light horse javelin, who are from Dalmatia, and they're called Maori when they're from North African bowmen. But they've also adopted the cataphract from the Parthian and from the wars of Palmyra. So they're adapting. They've got much more heavy cavalry. They've got cataphracts. They're less reliant on the heavy infantry, but the heavy infantry is still there, particularly in the West.
So is there a point at which this is a period of transition? So you actually get whatever set of rules you're using, you get an army that has got a lot of different ways of being put together, which, as wargamers you always like. Is that one of the things that makes this appealing, even though it's just after that classic, carry on Cleo, square shield era, or is a lot of this driven by the fact that it's the nota digitatum? Why is this so popular with wargamers? Is it really because of Phil Barker's book, Armies and Enemies of Imperial Rome?
I think once you sort of got past the Asterix the Gaul Roman era, and which is the fun that as a kid you brought up on Asterix the Gaul and the Romans looking like that, and you go, oh look, Romans now look like this at the end of the empire, and then you discover the shield designs and you get struck on that part of it, and then you get, I think a lot of people can get a fascination with Auxilia Palatina.
Yeah,
it turns into a massive debate of what were the Auxilia Palatina and how did they qualify? Were they heavy infantry or were they medium infantry? Do medium infantry actually exist? Yeah. Are they a figment of our imagination?
Yeah.
and it becomes all fun and games like that sort of thing.
So it's a great opportunity for wargamers to debate something with really strong opinions, even though nobody actually knows the answer.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating part of history, because you're running into the real. The end of this army list, I would say. Let me just check it. Are we talking about 405?
425, I think.
So we're looking at. You've got what's the battle in the east of Empire where they get smashed by the Goths?
Adrianople.
Yeah, Adrianople. They get really tanked at Adrianople, and that's kind of the end of the Roman legions. That's kind of the end of that era. And we're basically talking the fall of the Roman Empire as an empire.
I get the impression that a lot of it was to do with after about 200, and never mind the civil wars of the other empires emperors, that Rome was difficult to expand and it was difficult to maintain what it had because of the difficulty of recruiting troops to keep everything under control and bring in the taxes and that. And so slowly, obviously it took a couple of 100 years, but it started collapsing in under itself, and the whole focus of military activity was trying to hold what they've got against incursions from people like the Goths and the Alans and people like that. So most of the Roman campaigns at that time were defensive campaigns where you're trying to push out invaders.
They stopped expansion with Trajan. Hadrian is up straight after Hadrian succeeds after Trajan. Hadrian's consolidating the empire and fixing its borders. This is a period where the empire is kind of almost too successful. Okay. Everybody wants to be a Roman, and that's particularly the point of view of the people who are beyond the Roman Empire. So the Roman army was probably only at the maximum 300,000 people, men, defending an empire of millions, and it's not a huge army. And to a large extent, the people, the Goths who are beyond the Rhine and beyond the border, they want to get into the Roman Empire because they want to become Romans. They want to share in the Romans. And the Romans create sort of buffer areas on the borders, but gradually those become indeterminate, and the army becomes Gothic troops fighting in Roman formations. But as you go into the patrician phase, they just become Goths fighting as Goths for the Romans.
So this is an era, but of kind of big blonde blokes dressed as Romans still, though, and fighting it. And I think I suspect everybody's got. I'm looking at my own copy here of Armies and Enemies of Imperial Rome, which, by the looks of it, I bought from Leisure Games in Finchley for £7.95. I think these things are probably about 30 quid on eBay now if you've got a second-hand copy. But this, the legendary Barker book is. My introduction is dated January 1981. I don't know if I don't think that's a reprint. That's probably the time when it came out. The legendary book. Does this what's in here still stand up? Because we're now talking 40 years later, as a way of doing it, other than generic questions about the veracity of the Nota Digitatum and the rest of it. Does this really stand up still, or has there been much that's moved on since then that anybody's aware of? Because I know some of these books do get a bit dated, and
I think it still stands up quite strongly. I think Phil Barker did a damn. I mean, I know, as I said before, I went for my interview to do ancient history at UCL in London, and I was quoting parts of Phil Barker's book, and that blew them away at the interview. So they offered me what was unconditional offer, basically, to go. And I think that still stands up. You know, when you look at the original sources in the front, there's nobody more. You know, you've got Cassius. I mean, Ammianus Marcellinus is the number one source. You know, that explains the cataphracts in the West and things like that. I don't think things have changed a huge amount.
Okay. So when did the Roman legion stop wearing leather armour?
They didn't ever wear Roman leather armour.
So that's one thing that Barker might have...
Yes. But then that's one of the great war games debates. You know, I mean, the debating over notitia dignatum. Right, should we do a debate over leather armour? I'll give you my view.
But isn't that what they were wearing in Gladiator?
Armour is the statues and death, the stelae on dead Romans, officers, and they're portrayed as officers and heroes. So they are portrayed in sort of a classical Greek form. So they're supposed to look like Greek gods. They're supposed to look like Achilles and things like that. And also, your basic image of a Roman emperor, someone like Augustus, is him wearing a classical,
either muscle cuirass.
Exactly, with a design on the front. So you'd have an image on the front of the cuirass of the gods fighting. So the emperor was depicted wearing that sort of muscled cuirass. So if you were an officer in the Roman army, when you died, you went to your burial and you were portrayed in your mausoleum with looking a bit like the emperor. So it probably wasn't the ways that the Roman soldiers actually dressed. They were probably more in scale armour or no armour.
But this is quite a long period after. I know the Romans are a little bit obsessed with the Greeks and that kind of history and stuff, but this is now getting several hundred years after that kind of classic Greek time, which is quite a long time for that concept to stay into art, even for emperors.
Yeah, not really. When you look at how even in modern times sometimes people are depicted, you still have classicising ideas now, or in the Renaissance, or in the 18th century. So it's
Britannia
being referred back to. So a couple of hundred years later, it's neither here nor there, really.
Well,
Plus, they nicked various Greek gods and holidays and information from it as well. And the Greeks themselves were still knocking about, so it's not like they went anywhere.
When we look at Byzantine soldiers, none of us think that. We all know that Byzantine heavy cavalry looked like Persian heavy cavalry, wearing chainmail over their face and things like that. But if you look at any depictions of, Byzantine depictions of soldiers, like their icons of Saint Michael and things like that, they're dressed like Romans. They've got paterges, they've got muscled cuirass and things like that. If you look at the pictures of Byzantines are a continuation of late Romans. The Byzantines are still depicting their soldiers in the same way that the late Romans depicting, they're dressed like Roman emperors. And I'll go another further on that. You go to the Carolingians, you go to Charlemagne. Charlemagne is depicted as a Roman emperor wearing a muscled cuirass and a Roman helmet.
Okay, well, if it gets to Charlemagne, fine. That's far enough away, and it's almost also a hold steady reference, which makes me feel particularly happy.
This means war.
On the point of leather armour, which was what it was meant to be, did leather armour exist?
Yeah.
Modern Roman, but then that's what you go.
Muscle dresses were almost certain they might have had a leather covering, but probably over bronze.
I think it's all Hollywood.
Yeah. I think there's a YouTube channel, Todd's Workshop, and he did some experiments a few weeks back with leather being treated. He's been doing a whole series, sort of a lockdown longbow series.
Oh, right.
The sort of penetration of longbow arrows against different types of armor, even wood, and leather armor. No,
just doesn't work. Just really doesn't work. Okay, so it's just purely cosmetic.
The arrows just went straight through.
I suppose they would do, really, wouldn't it? Yeah, because if someone shot you with an arrow in your shoes, you'd expect that to go through, wouldn't you? Even if you're wearing kind of heavyweight Doc Martens or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe leather armor wasn't really a thing, and it just cut it through. So you end up with an army that, going back onto the tabletop, if you're picking out soldiers for this, you've gone past the square shield Romans, that high period. But are you using figures which are, because you've gone towards those oval shields, that become almost interchangeable with even the early Byzantines and the very late dominant Romans and that real end of empire Romano-British kind of, they're almost a shambles in a shower sort of thing? Is this the final point of Roman figure evolution, or is there something specific? Is this a list that starts off with the end of the square shields, and by the end of this list in 425, you're using figures who will take you all the way up to the end of Roman Britain in 800 AD, or is there a specific thing that you want to be looking for when you're picking out figures for this specific list?
I'd say the middle
shields has almost certainly all gone oval, sort of oval.
Middle Imperial Roman going oval.
But is that oval flat, or is that oval still with a curve to them, or?
It's oval with a slight curve. I mean, basically list 85, which is Middle Imperial Rome in APLG, which is the period before this, which is 193 to 307. They're getting to be, that's a transition from the square shield to a curved ovalish shape, and by the end of that Middle Imperial Roman period, they are fighting with a oval shield. Now we're in a proper oval shield. That oval shield continues into the Justinian Byzantine. So Justinian Byzantine is basically another late Roman army. Yeah, it's the same. Except the Justinian Roman army has become more Persianized. In fact, a lot of their cavalry are actually Sassanid cavalrymen who've deserted or joined their side.
Okay, so in some ways, then, would it be fair to say that from a war games figure point of view, this army sometimes gets a bit overlooked because it's not as funky as the patricians with all the barbarians in it, and it's not as textbook as the early Imperials with the square shields, but it does cover quite a long period. The figures have evolved towards the ones that carry on forever, but the real difference is that this is still an army that throws its spears, whereas you get more towards the Justinians and the patricians, and they're starting just to be long spears, pure anti-cavalry weapons, or again, am I maybe over-egging it a bit with that one?
I think they're still just about, they're far from peel, and I think they're still impact infantry. Their spear is still an impact weapon, but it's decreasingly slow. Okay. I think that there's not a lot of difference. I mean, the patrician Roman infantry would have been the same as a late Roman infantryman. It's just the patricians is a lot more barbarian based, whereas the late Roman is becoming barbarian based.
Okay,
so the patricians, you've got your federati, haven't you?
So the legions would look the same. It's just the patrician because the patrician is actually quite a short period of time, isn't it? Really, in some of these lists, it sort of finishes about 490. It's only 50 or 60 years.
I think the way the list is portrayed, the Roman legions in the late Roman army are still armoured and impact, and can have some elites, but it's pretty ordinary in the patrician list.
Okay.
So they're definitely downgraded a bit.
Certainly not what it was.
You've got a different. There's another thing. In the late Roman period, you have field armies, which are based behind the lines, and are there to go and meet the barbarians. But on the borders, the Roman Empire's borders are called the limes, and they have troops there called
Limitani.
Limitani, yeah. and they're just basically border guards and would be inferior troops, but the field army would go out. So Ammianus Marcellinus recounts a battle which is fighting the Goths in the west, and they basically go out with a field army which includes cataphracts and proper Roman infantry to fight a Gothic army which has got beyond the borders.
Okay.
It's having a pitch
You
battle.
also need to remember, don't get too hung up on patrician Romans. That's very much a war gamer's construct.
Yeah.
At some point they went, right, Roman tax base and the Roman recruitment base is getting so small that the legions are no longer big enough.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're going to say this is a different army because they're using lots of a lot more allied barbarians, but there's no cut-off. It's a gradual slide to...
And I think I see. I think that was the question I was asking. Really, it's for the Roman legionaries. There's just a gradual decline. It's an arbitrary distinction to say this is when they gradually just got to a point at which we have to categorize them differently. But it could have been one of those lists that just some rule sets could just merge it into one, all the way up to the end of the 496 or something when the empire actually split. So it's a slightly arbitrary thing to go. We're just saying a shed load more actual barbarians dressed as barbarians after this date.
If you look at the ADLG list, for instance, you could probably do a patrician army using the Late Imperial Roman list. Don't have very many legionaries. Downgrade them. Don't give them armor. Bring some Gothic allies, and that looks like a. You know what I mean?
It's exactly the same. Yeah.
Patrician Roman is called Patrician Roman because Rome has been sacked. Rome, Alaric and people like that have taken over Italy. Then you've got the patricians of people like Stilicho. Stilicho is a Goth who was a Roman general and is there now declared himself a Roman, but in actual fact he's leading a barbarian army which includes some Romans. It's become it's a barbarian army.
So it's barbarian at the top, barbarian all the way through. That's just an arbitrary distinction. Okay. So in terms of...
Stilicho is classed as an Imperial Roman leader, not a patrician Roman leader.
Yeah, that's the transition. That's the moment where, the patricians are individual figures who claim to be Romans. I'm a Roman general, but they're actually just a barbarian who's
Portuguese.
It's falling to bits, and
This means war.
So in terms of figures then, I guess people have been having a look at what figures you would choose for these. Whether there's any particular ranges that you like or would put forward for some of these particular things in I guess in 15s and 28. So if I go around the houses a bit, and maybe this is armies that you put together or how you've done it or whatever. So Simon, I think you were suggesting that you're trawling, you'd something in 28s that has really jumped out at you.
Yes, I've with the army looking quite pretty, I was looking for a set of miniatures that was a little bit more different to the usual guy with a shield, guy with horse, guy with bow. And I found footsore miniatures. They've got a late Roman, Romano, British, early Byzantine range. It gives you quite an interesting range of 28mm figures. So you've got you can add priests if you want to, various Roman heavy cavalry. They've got some really nice Roman infantry, either in armored infantry with cloaks, without cloaks, round shields, carrying spears. Some of them are kneeling. So it gives you quite a dynamic range, and especially in 28mm, you could have a bit of fun actually making up some quite nice looking bases. And also having the different troop types, so you can. They're using, I think it was the LBMS shield transfers. You can get some really nice decals or shield transfers with the various icons on the front of it. They look really nice. And then they had these quite spectacular cataphracts that I could just imagine would look really nice if they're painted up. And Peter, just for you, they're painted up in purple.
In gold.
Gold.
Yeah.
So they,
Nice bit of gold.
yeah, you'd be suitable there. But then they've
Got to bling them up.
yeah, but then being that they've also carrying into the ancient British range and that era of Goths and those lines, they've got like Lady Guinevere, Lancelot and Merlin. So you can have just a little bit of fun just to make some of your generals a bit more interesting. There's a warlord general with someone's severed head, always a positive. Yeah, I thought from a range I hadn't really paid any attention to, if I was going to do a 28mm Roman army of this period, I'd be looking at them going, my credit card's going to get very shortly.
These are built up because one of the Saga armies was late Roman, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Footsour's ranges are based around Saga. I think there's a kind of some sort of historic connection between Footsore and Gripping Beast. I'm not sure whether the sculptors have been the same or whatever. And it was Bill from Musketeer Miniatures that sort of became Footsore as well. But they do put out a lot of good stuff for the games that, well, for Saga and for the games they support themselves. And I think because there's that historic link with Gripping Beast, they're really compatible size-wise and a bit stylistically as well with the Gripping Beast figures. Even those Gripping Beast plastic set of late Romans, which is obviously sort of Saga designed, it's that set is a little bit Archer heavy. Possibly you have to do a bit of conversion on those plastic figures, but to mix in with that 40 odd strong plastic box to get you up to a decent bulk for 20 quid and then start buying in some of these figures, there's some really, really nice personality figures in that Footsore range, for sure. It's one I always kind of look at and I'm tempted by, but that compatibility with the Gripping Beast stuff is a real plus for me, just because it makes a 28mm army with variety but still be kind of super affordable as well. So no, that's a really, really lovely range, and that will take you all the way up, as you say, even into that sub-Roman British and into the sort of beyond the early part of the Byzantines as well.
If you're talking sub-Romans Arthurian, I think Artisan and Crusader.
Yes.
Ranges as well, but would fit.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of ranges that will mix in because of that kind of common heritage. Okay.
I don't know how well they mixed with the Footsore.
I think some of the ones I've got, some of those Artisan and Crusader are a little bit more bulky, but Footsore are also quite simple figures. They're quite cleanly cast. Some of them, they've got the matching range of Goths as well to do it, which fits very well with those GB plastics. So Tamzin, have you looked at any particular ranges for this army, or?
I haven't looked. I mean, because several years ago, I bought an army that had been painted by somebody else.
Wow. Okay, that's a result.
It was all Essex miniatures.
Yeah.
I bought it fully painted. It was I think it was about 750 point Fog army.
Okay. So was that?
They were all Essex. So
yeah.
It was an early birthday present to myself.
Okay. All right. Okay. Was that the Essex? When Essex has got that sort of strangely, weirdly running auxilia, or was it a bit later on in Essex when they're a little bit more variety in their poses?
I haven't looked at it for a while, so I couldn't.
Looked at it years, can't even remember. All right. Okay. All right. Dave, what about you? Is this an army that you've collected and put together?
It's the first army I painted when I started again 10 years ago. And,
oh wow! Okay.
Essex with Veni Vidi Vici transfers.
The water slide ones, yeah.
Yeah, I like those because they've got the sort of like accurate sort of for the Batavi regiments and things like that. But I've redone it, and I've Legio Heroica. Legio Heroica, late Romans are fantastic figures, absolutely beautiful. Love them to bits, and that's the army. I mean, I painted that about 3 years ago, and I still get it out and stare at it and think, wow, did I manage to paint that?
Oh, wow, okay.
They're that good.
Did you do that with shield transfers as well? Or?
Yeah, they're from, I'm sure they're from Little Big Man, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, definitely they are. But I think the Legio Heroica figures they're less animated, so the legionaries, you know, they've got a figure with a crested helmet and without a crested helmet, and there's 3 variations, but they're all kind of just marching. So it's like a Napoleonic regiment marching with a.
Okay.
You know, I've got a famous story about somebody asking for heads looking left, which I'll story for another time. But, so they all look kind of similar. But also, they've got the unarmoured infantry for the medium infantry wearing, you know, late Romans supposedly wore this strange pillbox fur hat. So you can vary them up or have, you know, I've got my legionaries are armoured. The Legio Heroica figures have got beautiful chainmail, so it's something you can paint black and then dry brush grey metal over, and it looks really
pings.
Then the shields are just fantastic because, you know, you've got the little big man shields transfers are really, really good for the Notitia Dignitatum. So,
and what about for the cavalry and stuff that goes with this army? Is there any? There's cataphracts are cataphracts, but
the cataphracts are distinctly Roman. The Legio Heroica cataphracts are very nice. They don't have shields, as far as I remember, or maybe small ones. But then the Equites, little big man, do the transfers from the Notitia Dignitatum again, as much.
Okay.
And they're fantastic, and again the light horse as well.
So are the do the cavalry have quite big shields to use those transfers, or are they just the little kind of dotty Byzantine shields?
No, they've got the same large shields. So you know, I mean, there's one. I think I've used a few Byzantine shields which have got more of a Christian image of a saint on horse on them for the generals and things like that, which really look good.
Yeah. Okay. So Legio Heroica would be your choice on this one. All right.
Yeah,
Peter, very much so.
8 heavy foot, 6 to 8 medium foot. They all look great.
Okay. And Peter, what about you? Because you've used this army as well. I think have you won a competition with it? I think.
Yeah, one of the first competitions I went in back in, I think it was 2016. 16,
yeah. No, I think that's looking back. Yeah.
Roll call, yeah. But I just reused my Imperials. So they all had the square shields. The round ones, I actually pulled it out the other day to have a look at it, and the auxiliary the circular shields, so I could reuse and repurpose all those if I wanted to build it out. I was looking at the Legio Heroica as well as the War and Empire ones. So I think I could probably, you know, beef out what I've got to create a sort of late Roman list. I quite enjoyed it when I played it. It was a good one to play, but yeah, I've still got a load of the square shields for the heavy infantry and that, so I could swap out and upgrade and have a lot more chainmail, I think. But I think I'd try some of the contrast paints on that if I was doing it all over again. It's one of those that I for the amount of times I actually play it, it's always been a nice to go and do the extra stuff, because we went through a phase of Romans did really well at the start of ADLG, then we worked out how to do them, then people using elephants, and I think we could almost go full circle going back again on it. I looked at it for the 28mm because it looked fun, but I just have an awful time with the decals, which I'd have to do for the shields. So
you definitely do it 28s,
yeah. So I like the Legio Heroica, as Dave was saying. I don't think I'd do him as good a justice as he does, but I'd probably mix them up with some of the War and Empire ones because for a bit of variety, because for a bit of movement in it.
Okay, Adam, what about you? Is this an army that you've looked at or considered putting together, or one you own maybe?
It's an army that I am at the very moment considering putting together, because I'm just finishing my early Imperial Romans, and I think I'm never going to paint a 15mm figure again. So I went into another 28mm, 25mm army, and I was thinking I like the idea of doing late Imperial Romans as a contrast to the early Imperial Romans, because there's that whole history thing going on. But as an army to play, it's different enough to make it a different army to play. So that's interesting. So I was looking at, and I do like 25mm armies, but they can get quite expensive. So basing them on the good plastic ranges, and there are quite a lot of good plastic ranges. So I was looking at the gripping beast. So I'm listening to people talk earlier. Is the idea of sort of like basing it on the plastic gripping beast ones and using footsore to add, expand, etc. a goer?
You've got others than just gripping beasts as well. You've got other plastic ranges that you can actually utilize, so you could get a fairly mixed bag. From the stuff I'd looked at, because I was doing a research for this when I was doing a 28mm army for my son, I'd use them for the key units, and then like command or certain ones that you want to pick out, I'd use like either footsore or some of the gripping beast metals, because I got a lot of them when I was doing my saga stuff, and I did exactly the same thing, and it mixed quite nicely. The only weird thing you do is when you're actually moving it around the table, and you've got a heavy one, and all of a sudden you've got a very light one. So I found myself chucking it around a couple of times.
Because I was assuming, which can be the mother of all ups, that the metal gripping beast would mix with the plastic gripping beast.
No, they do. I think the only thing with the plastic, because I've got I think mine was set up almost as later, even almost into sub-Roman Romans. But the gripping beast plastic set, from memory, I think all of the figures are unarmored. They're wearing that kind of smock thing with the stripy bits on the shoulders. Nearly all of them are unarmored, and you get on each sprue, I think you get 3 infantry with swords or spears and 2 bowmen. Now you can convert one of the bowmen just about through hacking off one of the arms or putting different things on it, but I think that mix is for saga, where you get big units of bowmen and you end up with too many bowmen. I think sometimes for that, and you'd have to do a bit of hacking. And I think the gripping beast plastics, like a lot of their plastic sprues, are just a little too limited to only use them. Maybe it is actually a commercial marketing design thing of, you don't just want to have their plastic figures, you do need to mix them in. So I'd mixed in, so I think some footsore and some gripping beasts. And I'd tried a few foundry, but the foundry ones were a little bit smaller. They're nice figures, but they were noticeably smaller. So if there's just sort of 1 or 2 on a base packed in with 7 or 8 figures, it's all right. But you wouldn't necessarily want to kind of mix them as much.
These metals, footsore metals would go with the gripping beast plastics.
Yeah, no, absolutely indeed. And the gripping beast plastic Gothic cavalry are an almost perfect match for the footsore Gothic cavalry as well, even stylistically, to get your hairy barbarian cavalry.
Then you've got this like the light cavalry, the box of that's for your.
Or there's quite a few people on eBay sell single sprues as well, because sometimes getting 12 light cavalry might be a bit much, but sometimes you can mix them into the other ones. So I think that's a really viable way of doing it in 28mm. There's a couple of other different manufacturers, but I think across footsore and gripping beast, you've pretty much got this nailed. But yeah, check on the gripping beast sprue to see if there's any of them are armored, because if you want to deploy armored legionaries, you are buying them, I think, from memory, mostly in metal, depending on if there is a single armored figure on that sprue.
Find the ones with the eagle on the shields of the armored ones.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. And they're wearing something. They're wearing a smock over it or whatever. Okay, Andy, is this
Could you
an army?
Just a quick question. Could you reuse like early Byzantine for the late Imperial, for the late Romans?
I've done a Legia Heroica late Roman army, and then I've done a War and Empire. Justinian Byzantine is quite similar, but the figures, the War and Empire ranges figures of Justinian's are really good. The infantry are very similar, but the cavalry are quite different in sort of like subtle ways. And I think the War and Empire range of Justinian Byzantines are really good, really good.
The answer, to be honest, it depends on your tolerances.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah.
Because I know Tim's got some base of Dayglow green
Chinese people, yeah,
halberdiers that
Yeah.
you can reuse for 2,000 years of history from anywhere east of India. So, kind of,
medieval.
Adam,
if
you
late,
might.
late Roman infantry down as early Byzantine Scutati, that they look more than close enough. You might have someone come up and say, I think you'll find that. And then it depends whether you want to have that conversation or not.
The reason why I say it is Aventine miniatures. I was having a look at those because I like their elephants. I've bought elephants from them before, which I've got elephants from so many different manufacturers. That's a different thing. They've got some early Byzantine heavy foot, and I was just reading it. They actually take the little big man transfers for either late Roman or early Byzantines, but they do a whole of that sort of plastic cast thing, so you can get a whole unit for 20 quid.
All right, that's weird.
Like a dozen heavy foot.
No, I was just looking at them and trying to see where their Byzantine ranges are. This new products for November.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is all right. Okay, so
Very good.
they're I think that leather kind of strapping over the shoulders is possibly a bit more specifically Byzantine, and they've all got those pillbox hats. Maybe that's pushing it a little bit. I'm not entirely sure.
The one I'm looking at has got, they've got the large shields and the like the helmets with the bit of a sort of like tail on them, sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's
Justinian infantry would look very much like Romans, but with a more speary, but not too speary, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But their cavalry would be much more Persian in appearance.
Yeah, I actually looking at those Aventine ones, they are lovely, but I think maybe it is that difference of those aren't spears you'd throw.
That's what you want
on the figures. You want spears that are sort of chuckable, but these are long spears. Because I've got in 15mm, it's an army for me that kind of falls halfway between two sets of figures that I've got, and I've got some a Donington, probably middle Imperial Roman army that's got sort of semi-curved shields, and the infantry are in a mix of chainmail and lorica segmenter, whatever it is. So they're half rounded shields, but not entirely rounded. And then I kind of go to this Strategy and Tactica, this kind of odd little Italian supplier that I actually got some of them in Canada that have got proper, oval, fully rounded shields that are sold as an early Byzantine range. But if you actually look at the spears, those really are kind of long spear, 10, 12 foot. You stick it in the ground and you poke someone. You're not chucking that at anybody anytime soon. So I think mine, there's a possibility that I've got clearly from using DBM and 7th edition armies. I've just got so many of the Auxilia figures from Donington as well that have all got those very big flat round shields that I could always rebase some of those up, because you don't seem to need that many Roman legions in this army. It's not necessarily an army where you're putting stacks and stacks of them on table. You
maximum 6 bases, so 48 figures. 48 figures.
But whether you're ever putting the 6 on table, I'm not sure. Is a possibility. So I think it sort of falls between those two. But I think I'm a big fan again with Dave of Legio Heroica. I guess the other thing is the old whatever it was range that Plastic Soldier have now come out with in the plastic is a possibility.
Spellum.
Yeah, the Spelli ones. Yeah, no, but this is their range that they brought out for late Romans was actually I'm getting that wrong. It was a Lurkio range, wasn't it? It was a new set, but it
was PSC. PSC ones were Corpus Belli and Lurkio.
Yeah, so I think the late Romans are Lurkio, but then you're buying them in kind of funny packs, and I think they look a smidge cartoony for me. But I suppose with these,
Corpus Belli box set sorry, the Corvusfell box set. That was the first set I did when I got back to doing painting miniatures.
But that's the square shield one, though, isn't it? That's the
Oh yeah.
I just that's the early Imperial. Yeah. Wow, no, but no. But the Lurkio ones that PSC do are late Romans with round shields, and I think you can get so fixated on the shields and the shield patterns and the LBMS transfers that in some ways it kind of doesn't quite matter what the figures are. But I don't know. I think I'd probably lean Legio Heroica, or if I was doing that, or I'd just say, look, I'm fielding either a very early period army or a very late period army, and use my middle or my post ones. And then in 28s, I do have I think about 5 or 6 bases of legions, and then some bases of Auxilia which use the gripping beast ones. But I've gone for the really late shield patterns where they're all different and they've got a lot of Christian symbols on them and things like that. So the shield patterns don't really wash for the late Romans. The figures would be exactly the same, but I think I'm not sure I want to do the same set again just to put on a different set of LBMS transfers. So I might kind of blag it with that one as well. So I think that is Andy, sorry, you're still there sat in the middle of the screen. Is this an army that you've collected, that you've looked at?
Yes, I bought most of a second-hand army a few years ago from Instant Armies in Burton one year, and then fleshed it out with a few bits of stuff. Sean gave me some legionaries. I think they were Legio Heroica, but that only gave me 3 units. So I bought 3 units of War and Empire legionaries with the Kickstarter last year, and I painted them up, and I thought they came out quite nicely. I must admit, the little big man transfers drive me mad. I just find the Roman ones are very difficult to use. So I did the shields free-handed, and I copied a shield pattern from some figures I'd borrowed from Ian Mackay.
Yeah, I think one of the big advantages with the old Nota Whatsit is that there are some simple shield patterns as well as the really complicated ones. So there is always a viable, credible one that is doable yourself. I think the Byzantine figures I've got, I did my own shield pattern, whereas I think the slightly earlier ones, it is just getting a bit more complex to do. So
I've got a 15 mil army, and I've used it a bit. Clive and I had a bit of fun with a doubles competition in Golden Tag in Cardiff a few years ago, where there were four armies of patrician Romans. We were the only one of late Imperial Romans, and we thought, what do they know that we don't? And it turns out we finished above them all. And the funniest bit of the whole competition was we had a Gothic allied command as part of the army, and we were playing Don McHugh, who was the umpire, and his partner. I can't remember who it was. And at one point, I was using my command, and I said, "Right, I'm going to hold them rather than charge in." And Clive said, "Oh, you can do a free rally with that." And Don said, "No, you can't." And Clive said, "Yes, you can." And he said, "I'm the umpire." And Clive said, "Well, have a look at the rules."
Yeah.
And sure enough, Clive was right.
Oh, well, that's a double win then, isn't it? If it's something where Clive was right and Don was wrong, that's you get double points for that one, don't you?
Yes, that's also the competition where in the last game, Clive's game wasn't going too well, so he ceremoniously sacrificed his die by throwing it in a bin, and after that, he didn't roll a 1.
Perfect. Well, I suppose if you do it late enough in the game, that's safe.
Was that an ADLG game?
Pardon?
Was that an ADLG game?
Yeah, it's ADLG doubles in Cardiff.
You also get to rally one of the bases.
If you've got a command with impetuous troops and you spend the 3 pips to hold them rather than charge, you get one free rally with that group.
Okay. What, you can pick a base and say I'm attempting to rally that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can rally all of them. You can do more than one.
Oh, okay, blimey, that's even better.
You get one attempt at rallying.
No, you get one rally without spending any more pips. If you want to rally any more than one, you have to spend pips for it.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got one bad. What's it? George Dick in Scotland. Got a late Roman army from Splintered Light, who are this huge manufacturer in America.
Yeah.
he's completely reshaped them, morphed them. What's the word? Customized them.
Customized them, yeah.
Yeah, and he's built a shield wall, and they look absolutely incredible. They're basically Romano-British Roman infantry.
Yeah, Splintered Light do that great range of Romano-British.
He's got them so the shields overlap, and I think there's some. You know, it was a long time ago I saw them, and well, he made a hell of a lot of effort with them, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, no, I've not seen Splintered Light stuff around for a while, but that's a good catch actually. I do remember that's a good range. It's I think everybody gets obsessed with Khorasan as the one from the States, but Splintered Light has got some really fantastic stuff at that kind of end of Roman Empire as well in 15mm.
Khorasan has also got Romans. I was looking at those. It's just if they had better postage, I'd buy a lot more of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's to do with the whole America thing, really, isn't it? That's the problem. And I think none of us are whizzing over there to pick some up anytime soon, unfortunately, either.
Now you know what it's like to be American, always trying to buy figures from Nottingham.
Yes.
I suppose so. That's the alternative.
This means war.
Oh, well, look, I think that's a good canter through the bit of the history of that army and a bit of the figure choice as well. Some of the painting things, a couple of different scales, which is good as well. We got away from just the 15mm, so we're creeping up quite a lot on the time point of view. So I think what we need to do then quickly is I think we've got two different quiz related things. So that's possibly another opportunity for the music before we kind of wrap up for the week. So I think, without further ado, we should head into, first of all, Andy's quiz. After the world of French disco, then, I think this is now 2 weeks since our last one. Andy, do you even remember what we were talking about 2 weeks ago?
Yes, because I happened to write it down.
Cheating.
That's just called being organised, which I am occasionally. But 2 weeks ago, it was all about the Big Bang Theory, if you remember. And
yes.
I explained about 3 different explosions that took place in history. And I gave you the date and the rough location, and you had to tell me what went bang. Now, I think, Tim, you actually might know the answer to one from the sort of answers, the sounds you were making. So let's see if you know this one.
Yeah.
The first Big Bang was on the American continent on the 30th of July, 1864. So who or what went bang on that occasion?
That was a mine underneath some trenches in a sort of siege battle around a town somewhere south of Washington, D.C. that me, Adam and Steve went to, and we have looked into the big resulting hole. And I'm still struggling to remember the name of it. Is it?
Petersburg, Battle of the Crater.
Petersburg, yeah, because I was thinking
Petersburg, that's right, yeah.
Petersburg, yeah. We've looked into that hole.
Yeah,
exactly.
I've been there as well, yeah. If you ever seen the movie Cold Mountain, the first part of that movie deals with that.
And the hole was a lot smaller than what it was in the movie.
Yeah,
because in the movie, it was about 50 feet deep.
You still had a lot of unfortunate black troops piling in there and not knowing what they were doing when they got in there because of poor leadership. So that was 30th of July, 1864.
Yeah.
So the next Big Bang I wanted to know about was on the 7th of June, 1917, in Europe.
Messines.
That's right.
Another siegey thing.
That was another mine under trenches.
Well, in fact, it's more than that because there was a whole ridge.
A lot of mines under the German trenches.
They put 21. They dug 21 tunnels. Each one they packed with 50,000 pounds of high explosive and set these all off within 10 seconds of each other. And you had field guns, horses, limbers, everything flying up 100 feet in the air. And the British just walked over and, the Germans are completely shell-shocked by this. Now, they set off 21 mines. In fact, 19 went up. One went up in 1955, and there's another one that still hasn't gone up. And so somewhere in Belgium, there's a hole in the ground with 50,000 pounds of high explosive that's been sitting there for over 100 years.
Okay, well, luckily all of us are banned from going to Belgium at the moment, so none of us can actually set that off in the near future. Which is
and even more sad, it's nowhere near Charleroi.
No, I guess so.
Put the show on. Oh.
No one would ever notice. So finally,
Right,
Andy,
and the
final
third
question.
The final question was, something went bang in the Mediterranean area on the 26th of November 1941.
Nope, silence all round.
Okay, that was a battleship called HMS Barham, and it was torpedoed by a U-boat. You can actually see pictures on YouTube, but basically what happened was the U-boat fired a torpedo which hit the ship. It heeled over, and as it got past the horizontal, the whole thing blew up, and about 800 people were killed in the explosion.
Okay.
So that was a bit sad for the people involved.
Question. Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie? Question.
This week the quiz is it's Roman related, and I've got 6 names of real Romans, so it's not Biggers, Dickers or anything like that. And 2 of them were emperors in the late Roman period, 2 were emperors in the early Roman period, and 2 of them were consuls in an earlier period. So I just give you the names, and you've got to guess whether they were late, early, or consul. So the first name is Didius Julianus.
You sure you haven't made these up?
Yeah.
I promise you.
Continentia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit relevant right now.
That was his name. Right? Second one was somebody. Pardon?
Gluteus Maximus.
No, not him. No, there was Magnus Maximus.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Sorry, Magnus Maximius. Beg your pardon. I can't read my own writing.
Yeah.
Right. Then
Isn't that a cider at a pub?
Yeah.
Otto, O-T-H-O.
Yeah.
Then you love this one. Publius Valerius Publicola.
Publicola.
Right. Then Julian.
Julian.
And Marcus Claudius Marcellus.
And so that's 6 people, and we're splitting them all into early, middle, and late.
Yeah, that's right. Essentially, yeah.
Early, middle.
The only ones being consuls rather than
All but one.
All by one. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's one thing for next week then.
Comment les entendre? Question. Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie? Question.
So look, with Andy's quiz receding into the distance, this podcast is just about due to recede into the distance this week as well. And before we go, in one final throwback to 2 weeks ago, we've got a very, very scientific, high-tech way of determining. Well, you may remember, at least a number of you remember, that we asked a question about which branch of John Lewis was Dave's favourite haberdashery department in London, and we invited our currently I think 113 on Podbean plus some on YouTube plus some on Google listeners from last week's episode to email in and potentially win a set of, well, one of them will win, not potentially, win a set of casualty markers from Vexillia. Martin at Vexillia has very kindly sent them to me, and I've got them sat here in a box ready to post off. I can kind of shake them. Give you a bit of casualty marker noise going on there. So we ended up with 4 entries, which is astonishing. 4 whole entries. That's at least 4 people, as well as us, who listened to the end of it, of the podcast from last week, and could put finger to keypad and send in an email to suggest it. So I've got the 4 names from all corners of Europe sat here in front of me.
Don't read them out until
I'm not going to read them out.
Randomising.
No, I won't read them out at all. But it's just, if we do the random thing, and we've gone for a low-tech solution this time after Simon's computer is obviously, this is too complicated, picking just one of 4 numbers. So I think we've got Tamsin, the expert in small-scale figure skirmishing, to use a D4, an old-school proper dice, to roll away. So I've got the 4 listed here. So Tamsin, if you could roll the dice.
We need a dice rolling sound.
2.
And it's 2, and that's James Alexander Clay, one of our most loyal fans and listeners. As I believe I've actually seen him post online. So well done, James. We will get hold of your address and post this off to you. And I'm sure you'll be able to post a celebratory picture on Facebook or something for us to do that. So that was grand. That's the first thing we've actually been sent in 24 episodes of this. Wonderful. And we've given it away immediately. Didn't we do well? So look, thank you everybody for sitting this. We're now into proper lockdown. So I'm expecting lots more painting, lots more stories by next week. So thank you everybody and goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
There we go. This is perfect.